was raised by my grandmother and grandfather. My mom stayed like across the street, so not too far, but my mother was an alcoholic, but I stayed with my grandmother and grandfather, and I have, my mom have two daughters along with me. I'm the baby, and a son. So, but my mom was a wonderful woman, and had I not got a chance to know her as an adult, then I would have just known what we heard and what we would hear throughout the night of growing up. But my mom was isolated a lot, stayed to herself, and as I got to know her, I realized that I didn't know her story, and I was glad that I heard her story instead of the influences around us.
So what was her story?
Like that her father had left her and her siblings with my grandmother at a young age, and they didn't know where he was, and the only father that I knew was my grandfather, which took on the family. He didn't have any kids by my grandmother. And when when we were growing up and when I really started living and noticing what was going on in my life, my grandmother, she retired from the Pickens County School District as a custodian, and she was sick, her and my grandfather. So as I got older, like when I say older, I'm probably talking about like 8, 7, I was taking care of them. My other siblings was gone. It was like my grandmother's house and my uncle's trailer and then my aunt's trailer. We stayed all right there together. So my grandmother's house was the main meeting place. And I can remember me and my sister and them sitting there talking, and she would say, tell my mom when she would come by, she said, I want you to take Teet is my nickname. She said, take Teet with you. She's just a baby, and she's getting beat. And my mom said, what you talking about? And I think I was like 4.5, 5. She said, they beat her. They beat her with a piece of wood. And said blood was running down her leg, and said, take her with you. And so when my sister told my mom that, my mom confronted my uncle, because he was the one that had beat me with the piece of wood. So she said, will you make sure that you not put your hands on my kids? And my mom was like maybe 5'5", 6", probably weighed 120 pounds, 110 pounds, something like that. And he was like 6'3", big man, military, Vietnam, wanted to act like he had all these issues. He was just really a mean person, and he didn't care who he hurt. His own children was scared of him. I can remember the trailer catching on fire, and they was too scared to go tell them that the trailer was on fire. So that's the kind of man that he was. But when my mama confronted him, he continued to beat on her and called the police and said that she abandoned us. And me and my middle sister was like holding on to our mom, saying don't lock her up. And he was just saying she abandoned her kids and they stay with my mama. And so we had to watch my mom get locked up, just young for no reason, because she didn't abandon us. We wanted to live over there with Granny. And then we'd go back and forth, and so then when she got out, she took me to Columbus, Georgia with her. And I told my sisters, I said, I'm leaving y'all here, y'all stay here, I'm going to Columbus. Well, they finally came down there, but I was like 5 years old down there, and it was a liquor store on the corner. And then a house where there were rooms on each side, like a halfway house is what they call it. But my mom was down there because she met my stepfather who was in the military. So she went down there with them. And so me and her were there, and then my sister and them come down there. But before then, I was staying on my own because my mom was an alcoholic, but she thought she was protecting me. So when she thought she was protecting me, she took me with her. And sometimes she would never come back. She'd leave for nights, and I knew everybody, so I walked up and down the hall talking to everybody. And I can remember my meals. My meals probably came from a guy that worked on this trash truck. And they would give him outdated cookies. And he would give them to me. And that's what I would go in there and eat. Or they would send me to the liquor store, these men that lived in this halfway house, and I would go up and get cigarettes or whatever they needed and walk back down. I was just 5 and gave it to them, and they would give me the change, and I would take my money and I would go hide it in a jar. And, then I'd go back in that house, and then I can remember being down there. I wasn't in no school or anything. I'm just running wild, and I heard some noise at the door. And when I opened the door and looked out, they was right across the hall at that man's apartment that gave me the cookies. So I thought that was him. So when I opened the door, I realized there was so many people there. So I slammed the door and hid. And I later found out that someone had poisoned him. And so he was dead in that halfway house. And another lady had died right up under me. So here I am. Anything could have happened. But I remember this man looking. And when I shut the door and hid, he come to the apartment and knocked and said, "Let me in, I know you're in there." Then I heard a key turn. And when I heard that key turn, I said, uh-oh. Later found out through my grandparents that he was the landlord. That's how he could come in. And when he saw that when that had happened across from my room, he said, "Come out, I'm not gonna hurt you." He said, "Come on, I know you in there." So he reached up under the bed and kind of pulled me out from under there, and he took me to his apartment. And his apartment, his office type place, was the first room when you go into this house. And he took me in there and he said, "I hadn't seen your mom in over 2 weeks." He said, "So why are you here by yourself?" He said, "You go in there and you take off your clothes and you take this t-shirt," and he said, "You take your bath and come back out." So that's what I did. I went in there and I took a bath, and he gave me that t-shirt, and it was real long, hanging down. And he brought me back out and he fed me. And he said, "We're going to have to go to your apartment and look for a number." He said, "Somebody got to come get you, because if they don't, you're going to end up with Child Protective Services." Said, "Because you can't stay here like that." And so he was looking for those numbers, and he come across my grandmother's number and called her and said, "I hadn't seen her mother in over 2 weeks. Said, either we can turn her over to Child Protective Services or somebody can come get her." So at that time, my grandparents said, "Keep her there and I'll come get her." So they came and got me. But I knew I was going right back into the same situation, because my grandmother and grandfather couldn't even read and write. So I knew that they loved us, but they really couldn't take care of us. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But she did come and get us. And then I enrolled in Head Start. I mean, a Head Start was fun. I can remember, because it was like right in front of my mom's house and behind my grandmother's house. So right there at the little church where in our community is where we went to Head Start. So then when I went to first grade, I went to Pickens Elementary. And that's why I went to first grade. But I mean, at that time, you coming home, you have nobody to help you with your homework.
Reading or those
nothing,
early skills, yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I realized real quick, if you don't get it then, it's so hard for you to get it later. And but I was going along and doing whatever. But I signed my report cards all the way through school because my grandmother had to put an X on things. But I can remember 4th grade, everybody failing. Like a lot of the black kids in the neighborhood failed. But nobody asked why. And I always wonder that now, why didn't somebody figure out why everybody failed 4th grade? And I went home and I told my grandmother, I said, "I failed 4th grade, but to them, okay, you got to go take 4th grade again." So But I look back and I just, how can you concentrate? How can you focus when you have to go to bed hungry sometime, or you have to go cold? I mean, because my grandmother's house was so old. And I mean, it was holes and but it was what she had. And I can remember her and my grandfather both putting $50 a piece to pay off their little house payment. And when they finished that mortgage, it was like the big deal. But I think they paid so much more money for that little piece of house than it was worth. But I can remember seeing them. My grandfather would get $50. My grandma would get $50. And they would pay their payment. And the last one between my siblings, whoever get in the bed last, you throw some clothes on top of them because we about to freeze, But that made me appreciate things so much better, And now that I look back at it, would I live like I lived there? Probably not. I mean, because it's gonna snow today, and I was telling them last week. I said, "Boy, my house used to be so cold." I said, "My grandmother." I come home one day and she had meat like shoulders and hams. Kid wouldn't know what that mean now. But it's just like if they went to the grocery store and the power go out, they got to make sure ice and all that is on the meat, because if it's not, then they got to get rid of it. So it have to be under cold to be good. So how cold my house was. If she had, I said, "Granny, you wouldn't." It was like a meat house in there. That's how cold it was. And I said, I didn't have to worry about going outside to get the snow, to make snow ice cream. I could go to the bathroom and hold my bowl up, And so when I say that, they said, "What you doing?" I said, "I'm for real. That's what we used to have to do." I said, and before we got up to go to school, you had to boil water. You had to get up early enough to boil water on a stove so you can go pour it in a sink or whatever to take your bath. Because if you didn't, you might have some icicles hanging out your tail before you get your clothes on. Because that's how cold it was. But am I ashamed of where I come from? No. I said, but it is what it is. So sometimes people say, "You mean you said that?" I'm not ashamed of where I come from. That's how I live. That's all we had. But I didn't use that as an excuse. Well, my sisters and brother, they dropped out. My middle sister, she was mean. I didn't have to worry about fighting anybody because they knew she was my sister, and she was 5 years older. She would fight guys. She would fight girls. She didn't like me. She didn't like nobody. She was just flat out mean. But she got kicked out of school when she was in 9th grade. Probably one of the best basketball players ever went through Pickens. But she was left-handed. She was just good, but she was mean. Where I would say, "Hey, I want to help my grandmother. I want to." Back then, you could sell soda bottles, like Coke bottles. And if you had those bottles, they would give you 10 cents for each bottle. So sometime I would go out and look for bottles so we could have a meal. But Jackie channeled her abuse through just being defiant. She didn't care. She would fight. She would smoke weed. She would do whatever she wanted to do, and Granny and them a fuss at her. But she didn't care. So finally she just left. And I think she got married like when she was 17. And my mom had to sign for it, which she did. And from there, they never come back. But what motivated me is I had some cousins. My siblings and them have the same father. I don't have the same father as they do. So my father's family lived across the street. And my cousins, I used to play with them because I didn't even know what Kool-Aid was until I went to my cousins. So they give me some Kool-Aid, boy, I didn't know how to act. Go get me some Kool-Aid, go get me some Kool-Aid. And but they wasn't rich now that I look back at it. They lived in a trailer. They had more support than I did, but my aunt, my daddy's sister, played volleyball, basketball. She was good at it. She got scholarship to go to college. Then the cousin that I was with, I was friends with, they all played volleyball and basketball. So I said, I'm gonna play volleyball and basketball. And so we started that, and we would walk miles just to get to play ball. And when we would practice and we done ran and we done did all this stuff, then you might have to walk several other miles to get back home. But we were that motivated because we wanted to do something. And then when they saw that, when the coaches and all saw that we had ability, they really pushed it. And they knew that my cousin them had more than me, but they wanted me to be part of a team. And all through junior high and stuff like that, they would buy like my basketball shoes, or they would give me food to eat on when we have away games and stuff, because they seen the drive that we wanted to do. But I can remember me and Sharon and Angie, that was my cousins, and me and Angie, we were like, Sharon was like, I'm making good grades, and I'm not gonna have no man that can't take care of me, and I'm going to college, and and she made good grades. She had all those smart classes. But me and Angie was smart, but she didn't want to go to no college. I wanted to do everything that Sharon did. But me and Angie was going to sell some newspapers. So we go up there and ask Pick and Simple, can we sell some newspapers? And they said, sure. Oh, so Sharon said, I'm not selling no newspapers. That's what we are. So me and Angie, we were fighting for territory, because you run and ask somebody, you want to buy a paper? You want to buy a paper? And then at the end of the day, we go over there to turn in our money. Angie, my cousin, said, I got robbed. I said, you wrong for that. She would always get robbed every time. I said, you not turning your money in with me, because I didn't get robbed. Here go my money. But they give you about $2 or $3. But that was money. That was something to me. But she said I got robbed. Man, so now we laugh about that now. But when I look back over those things, Sharon always told me, we used to sit right outside from my grandmother's house. It was a hill. And she lived across the street. And Sharon said, you know what, T? If I see you going down, I'm going to tell you. And if you see me going down, I'm going to tell you. We're going to always look out for each other like a pack. And I said, you know what? I'm going to lock people up like my uncle. I said, he mean, one of these days I'm going to lock people up like him. That I want to work with abused children. I just want to lock people up. She said, well, I'm going to do this. I'm probably be in business, and I'm going to marry me. We would sit there and say that at a very young age. But now, she did just what she said. She went to PC. She graduated on a scholarship in business. Her and her husband work in a bank. They have beautiful children. She live in a mansion. She did just what she said. Myself, I went to school even when they told me I wasn't going to make it. Because you sitting there, you're hearing that your mom's an alcoholic, you're stupid, you're ignorant, you'll never be anything. You can't even write right. Look at you. You're just shaking. But we might be in the middle of sleeping and we're jerked out of the bed and said, you go in there and you wash these dishes, because we saw a speck on it. That's what my uncle would say. If it was just, and Jackie would have world worse, mess around and not wash the dishes right. And so there we go. And we know it's holes in the ground. You might see a rat, look over the edge, and you go, oh no. So we were scared. It really terrified you, because you didn't know what you was going to see.